language models with all of that context and your request. Now, those large language models have been trained on the vast majority of the open source code that's out there and other public data sources and things, not just code. You know, for example, if you were writing a music application and you had to say, well, what's the frequency of a C note versus a B note? That might be coming from other public information that's out there on the web, not just from code in open source repos and things like that. Now it goes back through the Copilot service because we do some things. We try to make sure we're providing secure code. So if it's an obvious SQL injection or something like that in the code, we'll throw that suggestion out. You know, so there's a few things that the Copilot service is doing before it comes back with most likely multiple suggestions that you can kind of cycle through, and we'll see how that works. It started out just inline in code. You know, you could type comments and then it would generate code for you. And then we added GitHub Copilot Chat. And now with GitHub Copilot Chat, you can do a lot more. You can highlight a block of code and say, hey, Copilot, explain that code to me, or show me what that code would look like in another language. Or, hey, I think there's a bug in this code. Can you propose a fix for the bug? Or how might I simplify or optimize this code? Lots of different ways you can use Copilot Chat. And one important thing we talk about is prompt crafting. You know, you really don't just want to be ambiguous and say, hey, Copilot, I need a function to calculate X. You probably want to be a little more prescriptive, a little more precise and say, I'm using such and such a library. Given inputs A, B, and C, I need a function to calculate X as a little bit of an example. So yeah, if you give it very basic comments, you know, you're going to get it maybe a very basic function or one that doesn't really meet your needs. And if that's the case, you know, don't be dismayed. Iterate, try again, you know, delete that code and put in more specific, more detailed prompts, and then you will get a more accurate suggestion. Also, providing examples in your comments, like in this case, it's providing an example of the types of arrays that we want this code to be dealing with. So that's very helpful for Copilot, you know, giving it that kind of context as well. Another thing is Copilot draws context not only from the file that you're working on at the moment, it also draws context from the other files that you have open. We'll see an example of this in the lab. But above all else, you know, go with the flow. And we call it Copilot. We don't call it autopilot. You still want, you're the person that knows, oh, am I just writing this simple application to track vacations and holidays internally? Or am I writing what we hope to be the next Amazon.com, and therefore my requirements for scalability and robustness and everything is much higher? You know that context, so you know whether or not the suggestions are going to fulfill your needs. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the workshop here. So you can either scan this QR code, or the URL is there at the bottom, https://AICamp-workshop. See people taking pictures there. I'm going to zoom in on that URL. Give it a moment there. All right, everybody able to get to that URL? Okay, I'll go on to the next. So there's a discussions group there in the in that. Well, actually, let me do this. I go here. Here's what you should be seeing once you go to that URL. If you scroll down, we can see the README page and everything. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to sign up a bunch of proctors, but so one of the things we can do here is we can leverage GitHub discussions. If you get stuck, you can go into discussions here, and yeah, we have a workshop issues category where you can go in and create a new discussion, or raise your hand. We'll try to help you out and everything the best we can here. Oops. Now, as part of this workshop, we're providing you a free 7-day trial of GitHub Copilot. Now, raise your hand again if you already have Copilot, if you're already using Copilot. Okay, so if you already have Copilot Business or Copilot Enterprise or Copilot Individual, you should be just fine. But if you do not have that yet, you can scan this QR code or go to gh.io/CFP-SEA24 AIC. I'm not sure how that specific URL got generated, but there you'll be able to go through the steps to apply a coupon to your GitHub account. So you should see a screen something like this. Once you're logged into GitHub, of course, coupon. This is giving you 7 days for Copilot Individual. There's 3 different levels of GitHub Copilot: Individual, Business, and Enterprise. Yep, an Individual you can use anywhere. You don't have to be associated with any other GitHub organizations or enterprises or anything like that. So. Yes. Yep. What? It'll expire, or you can sign up. GitHub Copilot Individual is $10 a month. So you can sign up for that as an individual, put in your credit card, and you'll be billed $10 a month. If you're getting it through your work, through business, then your company is probably paying for Copilot Business, which is $19 per month. But if we also have that set up for those of you whose companies also use Microsoft Azure, any discounts that apply for Azure apply to that GitHub Copilot Business or GitHub Copilot Enterprise account. But yeah, hopefully you'll see. I know I've got a spreadsheet that shows like Copilot Business at the regular price. As long as it saves you like 20-25 minutes per month, it pays for itself. And Copilot Individual is $10 versus $19, so probably would only have to save you 10 or 15 minutes per month to pay for itself. There are ways to get it free as a student. Yes. Yes. We'd have to double check exactly how to do that, but if you need to check into that, talk to me afterwards. Okay. Oh, okay. 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 All right. Everybody have their coupon log and awesome. All right. So now we want to go to, I thought I had the URL for the repo. All right, so if you go to github.com, DaveOps30, and then inside of that repo, you'll find the Copilot hands-on, or inside of that organization, you'll find the Copilot hands-on repo. Everybody see that okay? Should I? Whoa. There we go. About as big as I can make that. All right, raise your hand if you're not yet on that repo. Okay. Oops. All right, now, once we're in here, the first thing you're going to want to do, I mean, we can kind of scroll through. There's the information for getting Copilot access again and everything, but hopefully we've got that now. But the next thing you're going to want to do is fork the repo. So you're going to create your own copy of the repo. And to do that, we go back up to the top. We have the fork button up here. And when we say fork, it'll kind of step you through. It's going to go your handle, and then you can say, you know, what do you want to name your copy of the repo. And I'm just going to tack the date onto the end for, in my case. And if you want to change anything else there, the description or anything, then we'll say create fork. There we go. So now I have a copy. There we go. Might just take a second. But now I'm in my organization there instead of the DaveOps30. And all of the code and everything we need is in there. All right, everybody able to fork the code? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to start a code space. So we don't need to worry about having Visual Studio Code, anything else installed. So you want to click on the big green code button here and just say create a code space on main. Actually, I'm going to do this though. Do it this way because I want to have that window separate. All right, so we'll create a code space. This may take a moment, but what code spaces in this case is Visual Studio Code running inside the browser. But one of the things about tying it to a specific GitHub repo is that each repo can have its own configuration file. So we'll take a look at this in a moment, but when we look at this dev-container.json file, we'll see that it already says to load the GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat and a couple of other extensions. So for each repo that you have, you can specify different extensions or different debug strings or different, scripts that get run when the code space loads and things like that. So it makes it very easy to onboard new developers, to your projects. It also makes it very easy to switch between projects and not worry about, your configuration inside of VS Code working for one project and not another, because now you've got separate instances running of VS Code for each of these. Usually just takes a minute or two. Actually, one thing we want to do here, and I used a separate window here for this, because what I want to do is put the lab instructions and this code space side by side. So if you're using Windows, we can do that by using the snap function in Windows, or the snap capabilities in Windows. So now I've got my code space here and my lab instructions over here. Might need to try to find the right balance here between font size and being able to get everything on the screen. All right, so your code space should be up and running. And now we're going to switch from the README doc to the labs doc. And now we can get started with things. One of the nice things about doing it this way is, as we go to copy and paste different commands, because there'll be different commands here. Where's an example? There we go. There's an example of a string here that we want to copy and paste. We can just use the copy functionality built right in here, kind of a thing. All right. So the first part actually just talks a little bit about what I was just showing. If we look at the files here, go into dev container JSON, we can see exactly what's in this file. And there's a section in here for extensions. And sure enough, there's our GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot chat extensions. So you can use this in Visual Studio Code, code spaces like this. You'd have to install those extensions yourself if you didn't have it pre-configured like this. All right, we've just some steps here to try to configure things like we have. Now, to make sure we're using the latest and greatest of everything, we can go down here and click on the little gear icon, and I'm already using the insiders version. So for me, it says switch to the stable version. But yeah, click on that gear icon, and if it says switch to insiders version, go ahead and do that, because that's the latest and greatest version of Visual Studio Code. So yeah, there's some things in Visual Studio Code to make sure the code spaces run as efficiently as possible and see some of the latest and greatest features and things like that. We'll come back to the discussions point. There's, like I said, very interested in your feedback on all of this, but let's keep going here, because we're gonna have a feeling we might not have time to get through everything tonight. All right, so uh-oh. Ah. Well, let me go back to stable version. Oh. I was getting this issue yesterday. I was hoping it would not rear its ugly head tonight. All right, let me try rebuild container here with stable version. It will. There might be a couple of some of the newest features that we might not see without the insider's version. So the key thing is making sure that we don't have problems show up as it loads extensions. Because if we can't load the GitHub Copilot extension, we're kind of in a hurting way. Okay, there we go. Oh, still showing problems, but I do have the Copilot chat. All right, do you see this, the Copilot chat here in the extensions? No? It says what? It needs to be updated?
Stable version is not out, but insider version that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's stick with, make sure you're on the stable version then. Yeah, that was an issue that first showed up yesterday. I was hoping it would be resolved, but apparently it's not. Sorry? It should be downloading the Copilot, the GitHub Copilot extension and the GitHub Copilot chat extensions.
Yeah, can we switch the chat extensions version maybe, and maybe that might work out? Say
The other thing I did after switching to the stable version, if down in the left-hand corner, you click on where it says code spaces and select rebuild container, then it kind of does a fresh restart of that particular container. Down here at the very bottom of your code spaces window, you click on this. And then you get a menu like this at the top. For me, I was able to do a rebuild. That'll be quicker. You don't see the chat one there yet. If you have a lot of extensions, did you do the rebuild yet? Okay, let's try. Yeah, yeah.
So I went over here. Is this the rebuild?
No.
That just came up.
Yeah, if you click on the code spaces there,
Yeah.
and then select rebuild container there, and go ahead and select rebuild. It still didn't come up? Oh, yeah, it's still, yep.
Take a look.
Ah, no access to GitHub Copilot found. Did you go through the steps to use that coupon? And are you logged in?
Oh,
It should.
I had the same thing. It said Copilot wasn't, and then I clicked the extension, and it just like had me go to another page and click a option.
Oh, maybe that was, so go to the second, the tab here that you said popped up.
this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can add it, Copilot chat
This
from the
came up.
extension list, then it's. Yeah.
Okay.
So
There more? It reached the end and then sign me out.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure why it would be signing you out. So how many are able to raise your hand if you do see the Copilot extensions and chat and everything? Okay, so it looks like most do see it. Yeah, just in the interest of time, I don't think I'm going to be able to do a lot of individual troubleshooting. So maybe what we can do is we'll follow along here, and then you'll have access to this. I mean, you have a copy of all of this now, so you can come back to this later tonight, tomorrow, this weekend, and the lab is designed to be pretty self-explanatory. So hopefully you'll be able to walk through things later. So in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of move forward here. So one of the things I wanted to do is, yeah, you can kind of read through, the chat, the intro and everything here. One thing is pretty much every time you type in a prompt or something, it's going to give you a suggestion for what to do next. We'll talk about that. But as we get into this first lab, what I thought we could do is actually just use Copilot to learn about Copilot. So this first prompt is, give me some suggestions for how to effectively use Copilot. So yeah, clicking there, I copied it. Now I paste that in. You're probably going to get this prompt that says, hey, Codespaces wants access to the clipboard. So you'll have to say allow. And now we see that prompt there. And one thing to know, Copilot is what we call probabilistic, based on probabilities. It's not deterministic. So we could ask the same question 3 times. In spirit, we'll get the same answer, but it may be worded a little differently each time, kind of a thing. So one of the reasons I bring that up is, okay, the response that I see may not be exactly the response that you see. But we said, give me some suggestions for effective ways to use Copilot for code completion, for learning about new APIs, for generating boilerplate code like model classes, refactoring code. If you're dealing with legacy code, you can say, hey, Copilot, I've got this repo or I've got this file. how could I update this code to use XYZ pattern or something like that. Documenting your code, quickly generating unit tests, exploring different options, learning by example, helping you with debugging and things. And some of the things we're working on is having Copilot actually be able to help you with some of the code reviews and things like that. All right, yep, and it even says, you know, I point out in the lab doc, there's, you could click on that next suggestion if you wanted to, or, you know, the next prompt we have here is what are some specific examples of commands or prompts that can be used to interact with GitHub Copilot. So now, actually, this is, I like the way this did this because it looked at that previous question, right? We had 10 different things there. And let's see. Yeah, it came back with examples specific to that previous question. So it's giving me or showing me an example for code completion, generating functions, writing documentation, and things like that. So now you can, you know, now we're getting more concrete examples of how to use it. All right, now our next prompt, I'm new to GitHub Copilot. How do I get the most out of Copilot? Ah, and I see I even have a misspelling in there. That's totally unintended, but actually not a bad thing. Copilot's smart enough to kind of look past misspellings and things like that. All right, so what are some of the ways to get the most out of it? Start with very clear commands. Like I said earlier, don't just say, hey, I need a function, but hey, say, given inputs A, B, and C, I need a function to calculate X, and oh, by the way, I'm using XYZ framework or something like that. That may also come out from just the context. If there's an import or something at the beginning of your file, or you know, one of the adjacent tabs you have open contains that definition and things like that, it'll draw from that context as well. Use descriptive names. Don't just use X, A, N, you know, for variable names and function names and things, but use very descriptive names. Iterate. If you don't like the alternatives it gives you at first, put some more details in your prompt. Leveraging context, making sure relevant tabs are open, or making sure there's a good descriptive block of comments at the beginning of the file that talks about, you know, your overall goal about what you want and everything. And experiment. Try. Sometimes it does kind of matter how things are worded, but you'll learn as you work with Copilot. You'll learn kind of how to talk to it, just like you do a new coworker, or you know, maybe kind of learn how to talk to that person. Use it for learning. You know, say, hey, give me an example of the Fibonacci sequence in, I know what it looks like in Java, what would it look like in Go? Or something like that. So yeah, lots of different things there. Uh-huh. Oh, it will not, unfortunately. So you may have to go ahead, if you want to use it, you would have to go ahead and put in your credit card for the $10 a month kind of a thing. Yeah, these coupons and trials are only good once. So you'd have to either set up a new GitHub handle or go ahead and put in the credit card information for the $10 a month. All right, we were talking a little bit about context there. So the next prompt was, what does GitHub Copilot use for context? What does GitHub Copilot use for context when using AI to generate code suggestions? So current file, surrounding code, other project files, comments and documentation, programming language, and library. So even, if you open up a brand new file, depending on the extension of that file, it takes that as context. Do I need to return, does it need to return code in Java, or does it need to return code in TypeScript, or whatever, just based on the extension of the file. So there are some common contextual keywords. So let's ask Copilot about that. What are some of the common contextual keywords that can be used? There we go. Yeah, now so my experience in preparing this lab and everything, this answer may come back different each time you ask it. So you can see what came back here. What I really am getting at, though, is what we want to ask in the next prompt. And actually, if I just go and type /help in the prompt, then it's going to come back and show me, I can say at workspace. When you say at workspace inside of Visual Studio Code, you're telling Copilot to use the entire workspace as context. So you could even ask questions like, where in this workspace do we have code that calculates sales tax? And it would come back and show you where the tax is calculated and everybody that's calling that method and things like that. And there's other qualifiers or / commands you can use on top of that. Explain, tests, fix, etc. You can use the @VS Code to ask questions specifically about Visual Studio Code. You can say @terminal to ask things or do things within the terminal itself. Ask how to do something in the terminal. There's also the @GitHub. This only applies when you have a Copilot Enterprise account, though. So that's one of the differences between Copilot Individual, Copilot Business, and Copilot Enterprise. But then you can also say, hey, I want the context for what the prompt that I'm going to give you to be this specific file or this specific selection in the terminal and things like this. So, I want to kind of point these things out. So after tonight, you can play around with these things and see all these different ways that you can talk to Copilot and get the most out of it. So all of these commands are known as participants. And then there's also the different variables and things like editor, file, terminal selection, etc. to use in there. Whoop, I'm gonna go back. So the next prompt is, someone mentioned something about prompt engineering. Please explain that to me. And I've kind of touched on this already. It's you want to be very specific, precise with your comments. You want to know that other tabs are taken into account, or if you use @workspace, it's drawing in more context and things like that. Provide examples in your comments. If there's different data and things that's going to be fed in there, maybe in the comments say, hey, the incoming data is going to look like this, or different types of things like that. And there's in the resources that are provided at the end, there's actually another markdown file in this repo that has a whole list of resources. It points to the GitHub Copilot documentation in a specific section on prompt engineering. Understanding prompt engineering, prompt crafting is really what helps you get the most out of GitHub Copilot. Now, the next prompt here is, what version of ChatGPT are you using? GitHub Copilot. It's using ChatGPT 4, actually specifically the 4.0 model. Now, if we would have done this workshop a month ago, this would have said ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. But we're always kind of looking at, you know, the new and updated models when they come out and see, do they provide more value? You know, do they run faster? You know, we didn't go with ChatGPT 4. We just held on to 3.5 Turbo because 4, it actually was a little slower and it was only giving incrementally better results. But when 4.0 came out, then we saw, you know, an increase in speed and even more accurate suggestions being generated. So yeah, we're constantly evaluating the new models as they come out, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to jump on using the new models right away. All right, so that's having Copilot help us understand Copilot. You have a question? Let's do this.
Okay, as far as providing context, let's say I'm starting on a new project or rolling into a project and they've got a big database, maybe 200 stored procedures and 300 tables, and I want to know which stored procedure should I use to get sales data, and then a little bit more detail. Can it do that?
The best thing there, and one of our examples kind of shows this, if you have the definition for those stored procedures that you can open up as files, that would definitely help. It's not something where it can go right to the database though and look at the stored procedures in the database itself. It would have to be in files that it can reference. So yeah, yep. There is something that we're working on called fine-tuning of the models, where if your organization uses the fine-tuning, then you can do some additional training on it. So that might be a solution for that in the future. That's in very limited private beta right now. All right, now let's get into actually working with some code. So, all right, I'm trying to arrange things a little better here. I want to go into the terminal and there we go. Say code index.js, and that's going to open up an empty JavaScript file, JS file. And I'm going to start out and just say, hey, I want a function. Oops, didn't want to do it that way. I want a function to parse data. And one of the things here is it might kind of give you things line by line, right? So if we hit, you'll notice if we hover here, in this case it says just one suggestion. So I hit tab and it fills out that line. You know, otherwise we have this ghost text. Now, if as I hover here, it's saying there's 3 different suggestions. So I could, oh, of course the mouse is moving on me. So I'm just going to go ahead and accept that first suggestion. But yeah, you'll see how we can play with different suggestions and things. So that was really too generic though. Function to parse data. That's not exactly what we want. So let's delete that code and be more specific. Say function to parse URL. Whoops. Paste that in there. There we go. Now we've got a couple of different examples here that I can go through and look at what it's going to give me. But now I can, yeah, hit enter and look at the different suggestions it's going to give me. And, you know, just kind of keep tabbing through here, tabbing through and hitting enter until it gives me a complete function. Okay, so now we've got a decent start there. And yeah. And again, if we're not happy with that, we could just wipe that out and start again. So actually going to do that one more time here. Now I've got kind of the function definition here saying function to split URL and return components. So now it's not just a comment, but the actual function definition with a clear name of what we want this function to do. So we kind of tab through things here. Yeah, and at times we might have to kind of nudge things along. Let me try that again. Give me alternatives. Yep. There we go. I'm going to accept. There we go. Now we're getting a little more meat here. Something a little beefier. One alternative there. There we go. Yep. It's giving us quite.
Subscription there, $20 subscription. Can I just use that or?
No, the question was he already has a subscription to ChatGPT. Can you just use that? ChatGPT subscription and GitHub Copilot subscriptions are separate things. So yeah, even though GitHub Copilot under the hood is using the models from OpenAI, it's a different, yeah, it's a different extension, a different.
It's a domain specific.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and kind of on that note, I noticed the results for the Stack Overflow survey came out recently. And yes, a lot of developers are using ChatGPT. Hopefully you'll see, my understanding though is GitHub Copilot has a lot more capabilities than just using the ChatGPT extension for like Visual Studio Code. So. All right, I'm just going to kind of keep. Let's see, is it going to give me? Yeah, I think it might have gotten a little confused there. Anyway, you can kind of see how you can, with function names and more specific comments and things like that, get good code. There we go. Now we get the end of the function. Perfect. Okay. Now the next one we're going to do with Python. So lab 3, we're going to create this Python file. And I'm going to ignore those prompts for now. There we go. And we're going to start out with saying def is prime. Now, one of the things I want to show here is you can bring up the panel that shows you what the different suggestions are. So if we hit Control Enter, whoops, have to be in the code space, hit Control Enter, then we can see what suggestions are in the queue. In this case, there's just one. There we go. There we have the function. But yeah, knowing that you can kind of review all of those suggestions before making a selection can be very helpful. But now that we have that code, we're going to highlight that code and show we can do a couple of different things here. In this case, we're going to try simplify. I could say simplify, I could say explain, I could say optimize, all kinds of different things like that. And then in the chat panel, it will give us another version of that code that should be accomplishing the same thing functionally, but is structured so that it's a little more simple. And now you'll notice if you hover over that code example, there's the icon here to just insert that new code, and it will overwrite what I had highlighted. So again, simplify, optimize, different things like that to work with and improve the code. Yes. Now the next one is we want to have it help us fix a bug. So go into that code and let's see here. Yeah, so I'm going to replace that I with X, and that should be a bug, right? Or actually, let's do, no, we've got N there. Let's replace that N with X. There we go. So now we get the nice little red squiggly line there and things. So now Copilot should give me a little light bulb. Come on, Copilot. Oh, it's not doing it this time, but it should give you a little light bulb kind of a thing there. You can click on that light bulb and it'll propose a fix for the bug. Yeah, I've got. Okay. What? Yes. Yes, it can help. It can help with logical errors as well. Yep. Not sure why that's not. All right. Well, the demo gods are not with me at the moment, so we'll just go ahead and fix that. But did others see the light bulb? Okay, good, good. So it's not, or maybe it's just me in this case. Okay. So yeah, you get the fix using Copilot and everything. All right, so now, next one is using Copilot after the coding. So we're going to see a few other ways to leverage Copilot. So yep, we're still in the same file. So yes, now I can highlight that code and I can just put /explain in there. So this is great if, say you're newly assigned to a project and you inherited somebody else's code and maybe they didn't comment that code very well, and you're assigned with adding enhancement or fixing some bugs. You could start out by just simply going into a file, selecting code and saying, hey, explain this to me. I don't understand. Just looking at this code, I don't understand what it's doing, kind of a thing. So you don't have to hunt down the original author. Maybe that original author isn't even with the company anymore, kind of a thing. But Copilot can help you with a natural language explanation of existing code. And another way we can do that is we can do an inline comment as well. So I could go in here and, whoops. Oh, that didn't do it the way I wanted it to. Let me close that guy out. There we go. Yep. So the question was, can you add the entire code base? What's the limit? What's the size? What I was actually referring to in this case is I can say at workspace. Okay, so now when I start to ask questions, I'm talking about all of the files that are in this workspace. Now this is just a very simple workspace, but if you had a workspace that had thousands of files in it, you could ask a question like, where in this workspace do we have code that does X, Y, Z? Or something like that to help you find that kind of code. Or you could say, do we need additional error processing in this code? Or do we need to have places that look for certain types of faults and things like that? So yeah, you're expanding the context to that entire workspace, not just the files that you have open. So, and when we get into GitHub Copilot Enterprise, you can do that. You don't even have to go into a code space. You can do that right from GitHub.com itself when you're looking at an organization or a particular repo, because you can index multiple repos within a GitHub organization and then be able to ask questions across a set of repos in the organization, things like that. So the question was, what happens if the context that it's pulling in that kind of a case is larger than the context window? I'm pretty sure you might just get an error that says, the context has been truncated or something along those lines. I don't know for sure, but and I know, yeah, there's looking at ways to increase the context windows and be very smart about how we're pulling in context and things like that. So okay, so what we said here was explain the code above line by line. So I typed in that comment, and now it's offering up other comments that are explaining the code. So it's probably going to go through and give me 2 or 3 comments to do that. I think another thing, yeah, we could also do that as a question rather than a statement to explain. So if we say Q, what does the function above do? And it's going to come back with A, answer. It checks if a number is prime or not. So this really kind of leads into having Copilot help you document the code. So if we go, let me take those lines out. I'm going to go up to the beginning of this file. Whoops, didn't want to collapse that. There we go, wanted to position the cursor there. Now we've got the Copilot chat over here on the side, but you can also bring up kind of a mini chat window right in line. So let me do this because this is going to take up a little more space. We'll do it this way. So I've got my cursor right there. If I say Control-I or Command-I, you can see it brings up the Copilot chat window kind of in line there. And so right inside of, now I want to go back to where I've got my, there we go. So now we can say things like document this function. There we go. And we can see it added comments in there. So yeah, one way of just improving code is to go through, you're new, you have it explain it to you, have it document it for your own benefit and for others' benefit in the future, and things like that. All right, we're not going to get through all of the labs here, so we'll leave this as homework. what I want to, let me get to, there's one that goes through some SQL stuff here. Tests is pretty straightforward. There we go, lab 6. All right, so I'm going to go to lab 6. And we're going to create a SQL file. Actually, let's see. I think I'm going to get that out of the way for now. So this is focusing on context. Right now I have no other context. I just have a blank file. But we put in here a comment that says define a select statement to get all students enrolled in a course. Well, it's really just kind of guessing and it's saying and the course name. And yeah, it's trying to, so it keeps adding comments here. It should eventually, there we go. Now it gives us a select statement. And again, I could hover over that and see, okay, in this case, there's just one option. So we'll accept that. And it's going to say from, and it's guessing at table names here because we've not given it any other context, right? But whoops. So let's give this some more context. There is a file in this repo already called createtables.sql. So I'm going to open it up this way. You can either open it up via the terminal with that command or open it up here. Excuse me. So now we have this createtables.sql file open. So let's do this again. So now define a select statement for students enrolled in the course. Yep. Whoops. Actually, there we go. So it's going through and joining and saying where and everything. But now, okay. So from students, join on enrollments, join on courses. If we go over here, there should actually be, hopefully, students, location, staff, registrations. There should be courses and everything in here. So it's pulling context from the other files that we have open. So yes, now we want to say, okay, we know we have this select statement. Maybe we want to create an index to improve performance of the query. There we go. Do we have alternatives? Yes, we have 3 different alternatives. So I could use the little pop-up here when I hover to take a look at those alternatives. Or again, it was Control-Enter brings up the panel where I can see the different suggestions. Wow, and in this case, there was actually 9 different suggestions in the queue. So I can scroll through and look at these different suggestions and see if any of these suggestions actually meet all of my criteria for exactly what I want, kind of a thing. Let's see. Oops. Oh, that's because I didn't actually accept anything. So we'll just accept that one for now. All right, now what if I want to define a stored procedure? So the prompt we had for that, find a stored procedure to get course enrollment by location. Did that not come in as a comment? It did not come in as a comment. So let's try that again. All right, and now it's going to step through creating a procedure, which, being like a function, yeah, you may have to go through several lines, several prompts, etc. There we go. Now we have the final stored procedure. But again, that's an example of code. And also, the idea here is these table names and column IDs and everything should be what we find in that create tables.sql. So that kind of sort of goes to that example you were talking about earlier. Yep. Yeah, if they're in, yes, you'd want to open those files, or if they're in, the workspace, if you do those prompts in the chat and say at workspace, for context. Or another way to do that is when you're prompting it in chat, you can say hashtag file. And then when you do that, whoops, oh, because I didn't select it. When you select it, then it's actually, and it might be a screen space issue here. Let's try that again. I pick file. Oh, it's going away on me. What's going on? It should be popping up at the top here, to be able to select a file. Not quite sure why that's not working right now. One of the ideas here, though, was, okay, so this was one stored procedure that we got, but if I give it more details in the comments, then it's going to give me, oh, is this supposed to be in the chat window? No, this was supposed to be here, the inline chat. There we go. There we go. That's why it wasn't as a comment. Yeah, here you can see it's giving us, there's more to that stored procedure and things. All right, now the next thing here was to say we're going to start with a specific query. But now I could come in here, select that query, and just here, I'm going to make sure I don't want to look at the entire workspace. I should have copied it instead of tried to type it. Optimize. There we go. It's giving us an optimized version of that query, but it's also explaining to us what it's doing to optimize it. So again, you can use this as a pair programmer that you're learning from, not just something that's giving you code, but helping you learn and understand things better. Let me think. We've got about 15 minutes left. Let me think about which labs are going to be the best to cover in the time that we have left. We'll just go with the next one. But I do want to leave a little bit of time to talk about other resources that you can dive into and learn more. Oh. We lost our space, or lost our spot here. There we go, lab 6. Yeah, next time I think I want to make sure I have a wider screen to do this on. Okay, so now we're talking about teaching Copilot about updates. So one of the things to understand is, when were these models trained, right? Large language models don't just get retrained every day, every month, etc. They get trained at a point in time. So that's important to know and understand. So you may have to actually kind of look at the information you get from Copilot and look at other sources of information to make sure that you've got, the most up-to-date stuff. So in this case, we're saying write a function. Let's see, did I miss? Which file was that in? Oh, this is in that file already here. Okay. Code explore.go. There we go. So we want to be in explore.go. And again, I want to be here in the pop-up, write a function to seed a random number generator. Now, one of the issues here is probably generated code using rand.seed function. Yes. Challenge is, as of Go 1.20, the seed function is deprecated. So let's see if we can get Copilot to understand that this is deprecated. So we'll ask here. See, it has us doing this in the chat. Now it's telling us that no, that's not deprecated, but that's because the version of information that's in the trained model is actually a little bit out of date. So now we want to provide Copilot a little more context. We know that that's actually deprecated. So there's a comment here that is more detailed. All right, so let's discard that. We'll come back up here, put in this more detailed comment. Actually, that had us putting it right in the code. There we go. Just doing this in comments right now. Well, let's try it this way. There we go. And now it's doing it with rand new instead. Is this using the current time? Sorry, I'm trying to rush so here. Yeah, that the idea is that's an example of, you may have to kind of work with the prompts that you give it to, make sure that it's understanding the latest information and everything. All right, so let's try. All right. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. You can go through the rest of these labs on your own and everything, but if we go down to the bottom of the labs here, past all of the labs and everything, inside of this repo is another markdown file, GitHub Copilot resources. So here inside of this file, got links to a lot more, the overall information about Copilot on our feature page. If you go into the GitHub Copilot documentation itself, you'll find sections there that go into more details about prompt engineering, troubleshooting with Copilot. The Visual Studio Code documentation actually has some really, really good resources to learn more about GitHub Copilot, such as the context that can be used for code completion, making Copilot Chat an expert in your workspace. So this at workspace was a command that got added to Copilot just like 9-10 months ago, something like that. It wasn't in there originally. So that made Copilot Chat a lot more powerful. So knowing how to leverage and understand that can really help you out. More details on prompt crafting and everything. And then we've had several blog posts that highlight like GitHub Copilot Enterprise and other things. We created a whole kind of essentials course about GitHub Copilot. This is really geared for enterprises, large companies. When we talk about the different ways to use Copilot, prompt crafting, all of that, we found if you just say to everybody, your company, hey, we've given you license for GitHub Copilot, go use it. Efforts might kind of stall out a little bit, right? It's kind of like giving somebody Excel for the first time. If you don't explain to them how to create pivot tables or charts or things like that, they might not get much out of Excel. But if you help them understand some of the basics, then they can get a lot more out of it. And that's kind of what this Essentials is geared towards. But there's also ways to measure how is Copilot being used in your company. What percentage of suggestions are being accepted? How many people are using Copilot every day, or how many times a month are they using it, and things like that. Lots of great blog posts here. Another thing I want to point out, a couple of things I want to point out is somewhere on here. And if I can type, there we go, the change log. So between announcements that come out on the blog, it's actually, yeah, let me go to a blog post. All right, this is something that's in the works right now. So this is a blog post about GitHub Copilot extensions. We anticipate that other third parties such as Docker, Atlassian, Octopus Deploy, LaunchDarkly, etc., are going to write Copilot extensions. So right from inside of that chat window, I can say, at Octopus Deploy, have the changes that I made yesterday been deployed to production yet? Or show me what's our current production, what's in test, QA, or dev, QA, and prod, and things like that. This is going to be a whole new ecosystem for GitHub Copilot, but it's going to help developers stay in the flow. They don't need to know where the LaunchDarkly portal is to go check the status of a feature flag. You can just say, at LaunchDarkly, is feature flag XYZ on in production? And it'll provide that information right there in GitHub Copilot Chat. One example of one of the announcements. But the thing I want to really kind of draw the attention to at the moment here is at the top, we have the change log. And if I go into the change log, this is our release notes. And I can go in and filter this down by category. So in the case of Copilot, find Copilot here, I can see even the little incremental updates. There may be things that we've done that didn't warrant a full-blown blog post, but there'll be a change log entry for it here. In fact, if I go back think it was around the middle of, yeah, you can see several things here. Yeah, improvements for working with C++ code, taking into account, all the includes and everything, and drawing from those files that are included, drawing that into the context and things. But that was specific to C++, so it didn't necessarily warrant a big blog post. Here we go. Yeah, there was a July 31st, so just 2 weeks ago, Copilot chat and pull request summaries are now using GPT 4.0. And so we talk a little bit here about what are the advantages we saw of using ChatGPT 4.0 and things like that. So definitely check out all of these resources and things. Okay, finally, the other thing I wanted to highlight here towards the bottom of the labs. There we go. Yeah, the very last section. Please let us know how we're doing. This is just the second time that I've run this particular workshop. So I'm definitely interested to find out, what worked, what didn't work. So we're actually leveraging GitHub discussions. We're actually leveraging GitHub discussions to collect this feedback. So there's a workshop survey in here where you can go in and set this up. How satisfied are you with this session? Was it a waste of time, or were you extremely satisfied with this? And add your comments as to why or why not. What's your impression of GitHub Copilot? Is it really helpful? Or I don't see myself ever using this again, kind of a thing. So just by a show of hands, was this helpful tonight? I know we had a few. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, I know we had this set to go until 7:30. We're right at 7:30. I don't know, Richie, did you have anything else you wanted to say or anything? Did you hear that in the back? Here. Probably do that one more time.
Gratitude. Thank you, everyone. So for today's participation, there is a certificate from AI Camp. If you'd like to get the certificate that's branded with it, you can send an email to, take a minute for you to write down the notes, info@aicamp.com, or you can comment in the Slack or in the Discord. I was at the Copilot training and I want my cert, and then we'll get in contact with you that way. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out. It's very appreciated.
Thank you. And like I said, that should be set up so that you can, thank you. That should be set up in such a way that tonight, this weekend, whatever, you can go through the exercises that we weren't able to cover tonight, or if you had technical issues and couldn't get very far, work through those again later. Put comments in the discussion if you run into issues, and we'll see what we can do to resolve those. Or I am in Slack. I think I'm in Slack as DevOps30 for AI Camp. So we can get questions answered there as well.